Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Korean Atlanta Mentorship. And before I get to the topic of the video, which is about how most people live paycheck to paycheck, I'm just going to kind of tell you a personal story of mine, which is I came from a nice area, or a really well-to-do, rich, kind of rich suburban area in Southern California. And even though my father wasn't like super rich, he was okay. Um, well, I had a lot of friends. Who were well off. So, for example, I had one friend who would take me to Vegas like a couple of times a year to the most exclusive hotels and just pay for it. And they were like, okay. I'm like, dang, like, you know, that's crazy. I had another friend who lived in like another one of those exclusive areas where the gated communities and $1 million homes. Another friend, same thing, owned a business, engineering firm, civil engineering, and made tons and tons of money. Now, the funny thing is that you think that, at least when I was growing up, I thought this, that you would think that people who are millionaires would want to teach their kids kind of like the same skills so that they can be millionaires too. At least to me, that would make sense. But it felt like, and this is my perception, and maybe I'm totally wrong about this, they just wanted their kids to be six-figure prestigious earners. So, you know how like doctors, lawyers, those, accountants, they're not like millionaires, but they're like six-figure prestigious jobs. I always felt like they wanted their kids to be that, or at least the friends of my generation. And I always thought that that was kind of weird, right? So essentially, like if you're a millionaire and you're not teaching your kids to be millionaires, then that wealth isn't, I guess, gonna last beyond like one generation. And so I always felt like we were going to be part of that part of society where the wealth is going to last from generation to generation just because we grew up in a nice area. And then I realized like, no, this is just we're in that part of history where maybe in one generation we were wealthy, but in the other generations it's just not going to last that long. And the two examples that I could think of this where one just set of wealth lasted for legacies or generations is like the Rockefellers, and the other example where there, you have a lot of wealth but didn't last more than one generation is like the Vanderbilts, who were, I think, one time in America the richest family in the United States or even on Earth. And I just thought that that's quite fascinating. Like it took me a long time to figure out, hey, like even though I grew up in a rich area, I thought I was going to be part of like the first group, but it seems like we're all just kind of part of the second group, right? And so my complaint is that we were raised essentially to not have the skills or the circumstances that the previous generation had to succeed and prosper, which always made me sad because it's like, why were we not good enough? Or what was the reason for not preparing the next generation to succeed, right? And that's more of a philosophical question, but the fact that we had to get there and to the point where almost a good majority of people in that generation have failed, regardless of what area they came from. The point that we got there always like broke me in a way. Now, back to my point. Um, so eventually, after I went to college, got a degree, couldn't really find a job, I eventually moved to the state of Georgia. And I failed at a couple things before I moved to the state of Georgia. And one of the things that I guess I was struggling with is like, dang, I'm living like paycheck to paycheck. And Georgia's much cheaper than California. So I thought like, hey, it was going to be easier here uh, than in Georgia. And I was just like, you know, when you struggle, you cry for help, right? And it seems like nobody is like taking on the call uh, for like nobody's going to come to help me when I'm crying for help. And people do this thing where they spend most of their life and energy to make it seem like to maintain an illusion that their life is better than yours. And so one of the things that will happen, probably happen to you, is when you're struggling, You'll call out for help, and then the people that you know will kind of ignore you, make it feel like it's your fault and that you're unworthy of their help because their life is so great because you didn't do X, Y, and Z or whatever. Like you didn't succeed in the rigged game that set you up to fail, so you're unworthy. And I think that's why so many people are depressed and struggling in silence because when they did call out for help, it's like a social conditioning where if you go out and reach for help and the first 10 responses is that people ignore you or they talk down on you, then of course you're going to suffer in silence. Now, for me, I just like to complain just because that's just my nature. And I like to complain about other people not helping other people when they needed your help. And one of the things that really got to me, and now we're kind of veering back to the topic, was when I was living paycheck to paycheck and I needed other people's help, they weren't there for me, and I always wondered why, right? And one of the worst things that I found out is that I found out most other people are living paycheck to paycheck too. And I guess my thought process is like, hey, if we're all drowning, why don't we try to like figure out a way to not drown and come up and swim out of the whatever thing we got out of together. And people, for some reason, people who are drowning are trying to make sure other people drown. It's the most sickest thing that I feel like I could have never imagined that the most of the society would be like this. But if you want to know how if most people live paycheck to paycheck, you just type it in Google, right? So how many people live paycheck to paycheck? Just do a quick search. And it says 60% of US adults, including more than 4 in 10 high income consumers, live paycheck to paycheck. So, good number of people. And this has been true for quite some time because I remember Googling this in 2015 and seeing a similar statistic. So, it's not like 5 to 10% of people live paycheck to paycheck. Most adults live paycheck to paycheck, right? Let's just modify the search. How many high income earners live paycheck to paycheck? Um, yeah, so it's a good over $100,000, about 50% of people living paycheck to paycheck. So there's a lot of people out there struggling. So people have the thing have this mind like, oh, okay, like if I make like $100,000, then my life's set. And really there's certain, when what happens is when your income increases, magically the expenses creep up, and that's why they feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck. Now, if people are living paycheck to paycheck and they're high income earners, that just means they have a cash flow management problem. That can be easily solved, in my opinion. But the other, if you're living low income and paycheck to paycheck, then it comes to a question of you have to develop a skill set that's in demand where people are willing to pay you money. And then once you have the money, then you have to learn how to manage it correctly. So you have to make sure that you do things in order. There's a good number of doctors, lawyers, you know, even accountants out there who maybe are making over $100,000, but because the expenses are so high, it just feels like they have nothing, right? And I remember in a way, like being paycheck to paycheck with low income is a blessing because you can't make dumb decisions like overpaying for a house, right? It's kind of like, would you rather get an MBA and have $100,000 of loans or maybe $200,000 of loans, or would you rather work minimum wage but have no loans? And I think working minimum wage and having more loans is even probably the better situation, just because the moment you graduate with like a high cost degree, like an MBA or a medical degree, you're kind of trapped, right? Whereas with the low income but no debt situation, you have all the freedom to do all the things that you want and just, uh, hope that something sticks, right? Like you try a billion things and hope that something actually works. And so you have more freedom, even though society kind of looks down upon that, right? So back to my point is that most people live paycheck to paycheck because our society from birth, we were taught things wrong. And I think it requires a fix of the educational system and a fix in our societal and community values. And that's one of the reasons why I make videos like this, so that the people who are watching these videos kind of, I don't want to say if brainwash is the right term, but maybe we'll just use brainwash, gets brainwashed by these ideas so that we can make the world a better place. You know how heartbreaking it was for me to be living paycheck to paycheck and find out that there's nobody help me, and people look down upon me, only find out those people were living paycheck to paycheck. And then when you get out of that, they still try to do that to you. You know how funny it is that when broke people are trying to look down upon someone who actually has money, but they're trying to maintain the illusion that their life is better than yours. There's so many levels of deception in society. It's insane. But again, enough of the rant. But one of the reasons why I'm making these videos is because, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, um, just know that we're here for you. We're willing to help. Doesn't mean that all of our solutions are easy or even free. They're not, but we're here to help, unlike most, you know, of the rest of the world, where the world in the last 10, 20 years has gone insane and nobody really cares about each other anymore. All right. So this is Korean Atlanta Mentorship. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead, feel free to leave them below in the comment box below. If you're interested in joining a group, go ahead and click the Google form link, submit it, or you could send us an email and find out our email address in the about section of our YouTube page. All right. Have a great day, and we will speak next time.